With the permission of the chair, good morning to all of you and welcome for this Global Supply Chain Summit organized by CA Institute of Logistics. It's my pleasure that we have Mr. Bharat Joshi, our co-chairman of CA National Committee on Logistics, to chair this session. Now I would like to hand over the session to our co-chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Mahidar, and thank you to CII for organizing this very topical discussion. Very good morning on this Friday to our respected speakers, to participants from industry, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to you all. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming you all for the Global Supply Chain Summit 2022, themed the supply chain in the new millennium, resilient digital twins, connected warehouses, and sustainability. It is indeed heartening to see the overwhelming participation of all logistics stakeholders for this very important event. We are also privileged to shortly have with us Mr. Anand Bhaskar, Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, amongst us. Our sincere thanks and welcome to him. A special word of welcome also to my colleague in the Logistics Committee, Mr. Nitin Vyas, who's a member of this committee and also MD and CEO of Voima India. I would like to welcome Mr. Soumyadeep Ganguly and Dr. K. Ganesh from McKinsey & Company, and also delighted that McKinsey & Company are represented through speakers and also sharing the best practices during this conference. Just a word on the CII Institute of Logistics and some of our most significant initiatives, and these include the CII Warehouse National Network, or CII-WNN, as a national warehousing movement open for stakeholders across the Indian warehousing industry. The movement focuses on connecting every warehouse in the country, irrespective of size or location. The CII Warehouse National Network also intends to achieve three key objectives in warehousing: evolution, efficiency, and empowerment. Secondly, the CII Institute of Logistics also has submitted a report on logistics standards through voluntary adoption of tracking, handling, transport, palletization, roofing, and flooring standards. And the same, I'm very happy to note, has been accepted as a referral document by the Ministry of Commerce. The CIL has also completed a major project under the India-Japan cooperation, and this is now an annual feature that looks forward to the warehouse Kaizen practices in India, and has continued cooperation in other areas, including quality improvement in logistics. CIL has concluded consultation with states which include Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, Tamil Nadu, and Haryana, and the actionable recommendations for policy are available in the report called Building Logistics Capitals. CIL has completed a significant survey on assessment of logistics competencies, skills, and training in India with the support and guidance of the World Bank. And since 2015, with the UN peacekeeping missions in the areas of logistics and supply chain, human resource development, CIL also is active. I should also take this opportunity to highlight that, and this is of course very topical, as you all know, that we have just concluded our project with UNHCR, or the High Commission for Refugees, in the areas of humanitarian logistics, human resource development. I could go on and on. There's just so much more that's happening almost every week. I'm informed by Dr. Mahidar of a new achievement. So I'm just trying to make this as topical and relevant to the audience here. But it goes without saying that digitization, multimodal logistics, increasing the share of rail in freight, or the modal shift, e-commerce, packaging. I mean, just some of the things that the council or the logistics committee is also involved in. One thing I really must point out is the CII School of Logistics, which has maintained an unblemished record of 100% placement. And thanks to all of our industry partners for helping us with this, and I hope this continues. Now, about the conference that we're all here for today. This, as you know, emphasizes on resilient digital twins, connected warehouses, and sustainability, which will all be very useful to redesign global supply chains, very much the topic and the need of the hour even, and the present context of global supply chain problems emanating from whether it's trade conflicts, geopolitical factors, or the pandemic. And in addition to this, there are other disruptive events, some which are unfolding and some which, today we don't perceive, but are, bound to hit us if the last couple of years anything to go by. The new supply chain designs are built on three key pillars, as we understand. The first is resilient digital twins, using sophisticated data models to make big changes in supply chains. Second, connected warehouses, using emerging technologies such as IoT or Internet of Things to optimize cost and service levels. And third, focus on environment, social, and governance, or ESG, as it's called, issues to meet changing consumer expectations and comply with new regulations, both present and future, and investor demands. Now, look, I'm going to hand over to people who actually know something about these topics. So may I now invite Mr. Swamindeep Ganguly, partner McKinsey & Company, to deliver the conference theme address. Over to you, Mr. Ganguly.
Chairman, in between, I think Mr. Anand Bhaskar has joined the session. Maybe you can acknowledge.
So let's take a moment to welcome Mr. Bhaskar. So it's a pleasure to have you here. We acknowledge you in absentia. We appreciate you finding time on a busy workday morning. And we're looking forward to hearing from you later this week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Joshi. As you must be aware, British PM is in the capital. So because due to that, I got stuck.
I'm aware, sir. And once again, thank you for attending this rather than spending time with him.
Thank you.
Mr. Ganguly, over to you.
Thank you. No, first of all, thanks a lot. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in this particular forum. And Mr. Bhaskar, this just puts an additional, thing that you are here instead of meeting the British Prime Minister. Thanks for you to coming here and gracing your presence. What I will try to do is probably for the next 10 minutes or so, what I will try to do, how we see the supply chain is evolving and why it is evolving, right? What are some of the expectations we see in the market, and hence how the entire supply chain from planning to logistics need to cater to do that. And whatever you see here, we have tried to collate as we interact with the industry, with the CEOs, with the supply chain heads, and so on and so forth, both India and Asia. We have taken a little bit of an Asia focus for this particular conversation. Some of the thoughts which is going on in their mind, right? You see the title is Autonomous Supply Chain Planning. And I will tell you why the title is like that. Because autonomousity in this entire supply chain is becoming more and more important as we go into this new era of what customer is looking for, right? And before I even start my presentation, I just want to make one point that supply chain is one function which cuts across every function in the organization, starting from demand, which gets generated at the front end, your marketing, sales, everybody is involved in it, plugging back to your manufacturing, right, where the entire manufacturing operations is happening, and then again linking the manufacturing to demand to what we call logistics, and at the back end is your procurement, which is the suppliers, right? So it actually cut across every function. And that's where the complexity becomes much more with the increasing demand of what the market is looking for. If we move on to the next page, this is again some of the surveys what we have done, that even before COVID, the requirement of an organization, which supply chain is the backbone, was constantly increasing, right? So kind of 180% plus on time in full, right? I'm sure all of you are familiar with on time in full. So it's not about the service level, but it is on time in full at every point of time. 1 to 2 days to reach the customer, D2C. I think DTC is very common today after the pandemic hit, but this trend started happening even before pandemic, that 1 to 2 days of DTC, 7 to 8 days in modern trade where the SKUs are changing on a regular basis, a very high level of forecast accuracy at an SKU location level, not at an overall aggregated level, but an SKU location level. And you see some of those comments, those are actual real comments, and we have many such, but we try to consolidate to give you a picture that how supply chain resiliency, and Mr. Joshi, you mentioned about resilience, you mentioned about digital twin, is becoming very, very important to meet this, what the customer is looking at. If you go to the next page, this is not only what that says is, this was not only for B2B2C, which is say a retail, a consumer, and so on and so forth. This was becoming true even for B2B, right? When we work with OEMs in auto, tier 1 manufacturer, tier 2 manufacturers in auto, and this was become a reality. A 98% OTIF within 15 days, change your entire plan and respond to what you are looking at, because they were ultimately, somebody was going to the customer, right? So this is again some of the focus comments as you see. Now, what happened as this was moving, we hit with pandemic, right? And suddenly we hit into a world which nobody of us have ever seen, right? Whether it is operating from remote, whether it is reaching at the home of the customer, and so on and so forth. And what that meant is that the agility and the efficiency needed to happen in what we call 6 blocks of the entire supply chain. Right? And that's why I started with saying, this is one function where I found that this is not one function, it's actually cutting across every function, right? The first is, how do you make a very strong collaboration between customer service and your supply chain, right? Because at every point of time, no organizations operate at a optimum or ideal inventory level. There is always some inventory balance happening at every point of time. How do you make sure that you allocate your every inventory most efficiently what customer is needed, right? How do your backend is actually completely aligned with that? Second is very, very important, and this has got the maximum amount of, I would say, acceleration in terms of focus, is the supplier management, right? And I'll just give an example. I work with a couple of very large auto OEMs, tire manufacturers in India, battery manufacturers in India. In COVID, they suddenly realized they have no clue. They have no clue what the tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 suppliers situation is, right? Now, at the point of time, they may be a very small part of your bill of material. But if that material doesn't arrive at your plant, you cannot make the product. So suddenly, people had no clue how to ramp up the plant, what part of the plant to run, because you have no clarity that what's happening on them, right? So this entire focus on supplier management and looking at them not as a cost center who is providing your BOM, but actually your strategic part to meet your customer demand, right? So that has got a significant amount of change, and every CXO board conversations I'm in today, this is the hot topic which people want to move on, right? I think the third, very important, the manufacturing operations. But what COVID suddenly made people realize is that, and we actually penned an article just before COVID where it said, make your system agile, but not fragile, right? Manufacturing operations, you make it agile, but you need to put certain boundary conditions within that. A manufacturing plant is not a switch on, switch off. The moment you try to operate a plant as a switch on, switch off, you are going to lose efficiency and ultimately customer service. So how do you make sure your manufacturing is agile, but at the same time, you're creating right boundaries? You are actually accepting some of the constraints you have. So for example, a labor constraint, you have a labor constraints. How do you accept that and put that into your planning element or in your supply chain element while trying to improve upon it, right? So that was at least pre-COVID, very few organizations thought in that way and connected their customer service, the supplier management and manufacturing together. But I think COVID was a big realization, especially the labor shortage the entire country has faced during that pandemic, that how to really make it integrated and make a plan which works for all and keeping customer at the center. The fourth point is your network. How is your network? What is the right network? Is it one network for all type of channel? Is it different network for all type of channel? Mr. Joshi, you talked about warehouse automations and all. Is it one warehouse catering to multiple network? Hence, your warehouse need to be capable within one boundary, having multiple virtual boundaries, right? All that questions came into play. And today I'm working with multiple organizations who are looking at their network completely differently, right? And thanks to the GST and all the development happened in our logistics sector, that how to fully utilize it and have your network which is ready to serve your customer, but at the same time, your manufacturing operations are fully integrated into that network and know how to make the system most efficient, right? Then the fifth pillar, very, very important, is the entire transportation management, right? How do you do your transportation management? It's no more logistics control tower of putting a TV screen and 5 people looking at the screen is a thing of a past, right? Which is completely moved on. The transportation management has gone to a completely different level where each of your modes are in a virtual reality and you're trying to do a dynamic allocation that which mode, which truck type is the most important element. At the same time, your entire ecosystem, which is your transporters, whether railways, your coastal ways, all of them are connected into it and something in it for them. So for example, we work for the large Indian mining players where the entire their logistics is in a cloud platform. And the alerts are going to the transporter saying, hey, look, this is your asset, which is not getting utilized maximum. And this is the reason it is not getting utilized. And this is what you can do. So that you are not connecting with the transporter to squeeze money from him or her, but you are actually giving them alerts which will create efficiency in the system, right? And lastly, but not the least, to get all of this together, you need a planning phenomena which integrates everything, starting from your supply to your manufacturing, to your logistics, your transporters, and finally your demand point, right? And that's why it becomes very, very important. And that's why knowingly, I kind of made it autonomous planning, where all of this is integrated. You are taking out the calculations, the logic out of the human and putting it into an automated system. And the system, by the way, is throwing you scenarios and asking you and helping you to take what is the right scenario to be chosen as per the current situation. And to represent it in a kind of a visual manner, it's a very busy chart. Sorry, sometimes we consultants complicate charts, right? I can see many people are laughing. Please bear with us for that. This is one of our habit I have seen always, right? But what we try to do, kind of draw the entire thing, right? So if you look at the bold words, there is fulfillment on the right hand side. As you go, there is planning, there is manufacturing and procurement, and integrated end-to-end planning is that one phenomena which is trying to hold everything together, right? And let me try to explain it a little more visually, how it is happening, how we envision that this will happen. What you see on the left-hand side is probably a rudimentary one, which many organizations have moved from, that there is a financial planning, there is a demand planning, there is a supply planning, and there is an S&OP session, right? We see the journey of organization moving from extreme left-hand side to the extreme right-hand side, right? Let me skip from extreme left-hand side to extreme right-hand side for a moment, and then I'll come in between. What the extreme right-hand side, what we call is the lighthouse vision. And I'm sure many of you are aware of World Economic Forum lighthouse. What we say as lighthouse vision is something called autonomous planning, where you are not doing demand back or supply forward planning. The central theme of your planning, how can you maximize the organization's core theme? It can be profit, it can be cost, whatever you say, right? And then everything, whether it is a raw material planning, logistics planning, manufacturing planning, dispatch, inventory, everything connects to that. What happens in that way, you may say, because this customer is very, very important for me, to supply this customer in 24 hours is a strategic priority for me. I don't mind even giving a dedicated line of my manufacturing with 70% utilization, because that's the goal you are trying to fulfill. You are not looking at the OE at that point of time. It is actually trying to fulfill what is your say profit maximization, what is your objective function for the organization and not for a function. That's where the planning shifts from a siloed planning of each of the function to an autonomous planning, where the planning happens at a holistic manner, right? And in between, as you see, is the progression. Ganesh, if you just be in the page for a moment. In between, as you see, is the progression or the journey the organizations take. And our survey shows that most of the organization, especially in India, are somewhere between 1 and 2. Most of the organization. Few organizations have started taking a leap towards 4 and reached at 3, right? few sectors like consumer and auto by the inherent nature are kind of a driver of that change. But this is one conversation. If you ask me, if I meet 4 CEOs in a week, at least 3 folks talk to me on this particular topic, because this is going to change the way you are operating, right? And if you go to the next page, Ganesh, just to show it in terms of survey, almost 36 supply chain leaders, the top leaders in Asia, who has collectively 800 plus years of experience. When we talk to them, right? If you move to the next page, Ganesh, this is a kind of a result we got, right? As I mentioned, that the middle two, which is 56 plus 21, almost close to 80% of the folks are somewhere between traditional SNOP and collaborative SNOP cycle, while the bulk of the folks are at 2. Very few have moved to 7, right? And that's the picture. Even if I compare it with globally, barring few geographies like very predominant auto OEM geographies like Germany, barring few geographies, this results more or less stays, right? And of course, if I go to beyond Asia, these numbers are more left-hand skewed, because we have always seen in Asia, the responses are generally right-hand skewed. We have a positive bias in Asia, while in the other geographies, there's a little bit of a negative bias. But those are cultural biases. If I take the cultural bias out, the message here is almost 60-70% of the folks are in 1 and 2, and everybody wants to go towards 4, right? And let me spend the next 2 minutes. I know I have probably a couple of minutes left, but I'll try to wrap it up in the next 2 minutes. If you go to the next page, Ganesh, is that the 5 hallmark of autonomous planning are the following, which is there in the right-hand side, right? A is that take the human error out. More and more, you have siloed plannings. At every point of time, you will have human error. So take the human error out. Whatever can done in a system, put it in the system, make it integrated. B is that analytics, the power of data has gone leaps and bounds, right? So integrate that into your entire supply chain system. So for example, the data can able to predict today how people are going to behave. You all know how the entire app-based, OTT-based economies are working, right? So use that data to make your supply chain as agile as possible. Point number 3, very, very important, think beyond SNOP and IBP, right? I think that's the very, very core point. As we kept it, see the think beyond of it. It's SNOP is the think of past now. Think beyond SNOP and IBP. Think at autonomous planning, where one single function or a single matrix, and then everything comes behind that. Point number 4, very important, and that's where 4 and 5, where most of the journeys we have seen failing, is that hardware into your business. And I'll talk about that. What do I mean by that? And build the right organization capability. Cannot reiterate point number 4 and 5, that this is not a technological transformation. This is an organization transformation where the organization business as usual had to change, where the capability need to build, and people need to be hardwired to work in this way, right? If you go to the next page, so this is just an example. We say P&Gs, Nestle's, Daimlers of the world are the lighthouses who are showing us the vision, right? There's many tech players available in the market who can partner to do this journey, and a significant amount of impact we have seen in terms of inventory, forecast, supply chain cost, overall 1 to 3% EBITDA, as I like to call it, right? Having said that, if you go to the next page, when we actually asked people who have taken some leaps on doing this advanced planning system, what this chart shows is that while 98% people said that we are doing something, almost 70 to 80% people have said the intended result have not come. Whether it is in terms of the KPI movement, whether it is some of the huge delay in the project, whether it is terms of the cost to benefit ROI and all. But there are still examples, 5 to 10 to 15%, where people have been able to capture it. So what it says, it's real, but there are a certain, what we call a playbook to be played to make this happen, right? And maybe my last page at the last 30-second level, as I was mentioning, to re-emphasize that don't treat this as a technology supply chain transformation. That's the recipe for failure. It has to be taken as a complete organization structure transformation, because you are going to touch demand, you're going to touch manufacturing, you're going to touch your procurement, you're going to touch your supply chain logistics, right? So it's not a supply chain transformation. It's an organization transformation. Don't take this as a technology transformation only. It's a process and tools transformation. That what is the process everybody in the organization is committing to? How are you hardwiring it into the KPI of the folks? How are you hardwiring into the performance management on a day-to-day level happens? And then, very important, what is your people structurance going to be? That what is the capability, new capability you need? What are some of the reskilling within your organization need and restructuring within your organization need? And lastly, technology, of course, is a very, very important part. But without that organization, process, and people, most of the cases, people doesn't get the intended result. Let me take a pause. Over to you, Bharat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ganguly. Thank you so much. That was excellent. May I now invite Mr. Nitin Vyas to please deliver the keynote address.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Joshi. It's a very important topic, the supply chain in new millennium, and the 3 points in it: resilient digital twins in the new digital world, a connected warehouse, and the last but not the least, the most important one, sustainability. I think before talking about that, I would say the last couple of years, including and it's carrying on, have been one of the most challenging for the supply chain professionals. In the true sense, the VUCA world is not going away. It's the pandemic, the geopolitical situations. It's challenging at every front. It's the freight costs. When we talk, it's gone beyond anybody's control. 2 years back, where you were paying for $800 for a 40-feet container, you are paying around $13,000, $15,000. Unavailability of the containers is a challenge which everyday supply chain professional is facing with. Your commodity prices have gone out of control. With the semiconductor issues, it is pushing the deliveries not only in the auto sector but across the industry, and which is triggering panic buying. Now, when panic buying happens, how do you identify it as a panic buying? It's a point like Soumyadeep was also talking about. What's the balance where it is? Do you want to increase the inventories, or are you going to block your cash? How you are going to do? How you are going to manage your deliveries? And as Soumyadeep's slides were talking, most of the companies in India are standing on the left-hand side. And how do we go to autonomous? But before that, going into talking about the digital twins or the digital journey, or having the data strategy and AI and getting it autonomous and getting away from SOPs and getting the human error out. And that's where the challenge is, that it is somewhere, this is an opportunity, this VUCA world, for the supply chain professionals to move on to the digital worlds, to the resilient digital twins, because and it's not a recipe that today you say, I'll have a digital twins, or I'll have a digital strategy, and I will have the solution, autonomous planning, tomorrow. It's a journey where it's a 4th level where you'll get the predictive or the autonomous, but you need to start with the data strategy. And it's a journey. It's not a thing which will happen tomorrow, but one needs to start now. And no better time than now, when you have no clarity, no visibility. There was a point mentioned by Soumyadeep with respect to the visibility in the supply chain in tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 suppliers. So getting that visibility, I think no better tools than the digital tools, and integrating the sub-suppliers, the tier 2, tier 3 into your network. So I think it is a VUCA world. It is a tough time, but it is giving the huge opportunity to get resilient, to get flexible, adaptable supply chain. I can quote one example for our company. For one of the commodity, supplier for United States was in one country and supplier for Europe was in another country. And those 2 countries are in conflict, and both the countries stopped supplying. How does the supply chain immediately enables and get the materials into it? And that's where the resilient digital twin will talk. I'll not talk about the connected warehouse, but a little bit about sustainability. And sustainability, when we talk about environmental, social, and governance, and when we talk about warehouses, I think it is beyond having solar panels sustainability. And it's the starting point is, where do you start about ESG or sustainability? I think the supply chain professionals need to know, where does it start and what is your company's footprint or company's take on ESG, and what is your carbon footprint, and then start lessening it. Knowing where you are, then you're moving. And it's not just about warehouse or logistics, it's the sourcing, how you source, how you design, what is the design, and here supply chain professionals have to be across the board. So I would like to end the talk with the thoughts that it is a tough time. It is one of the tough times for supply chain professionals, but it gives a huge opportunity to embrace the digital world and also to make central part of all supply chain, central theme for all the companies as sustainability. Thank you very much. I wish great deliberations, great talks, whole day on these topics. Thank you very much, Mr. Joshi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vyas. May I now request Dr. K. Ganesh, Associate Partner at McKinsey, to please give us a brief on the conference white paper. Dr. Ganesh.
Thanks a lot, Varun. Thank you very much. Very good morning to everyone. Very glad to be here. And we are very proud to release our white paper, which is on autonomous supply chain planning, what Soumya explained in detail. Very happy to collaborate with CI and share our thoughts in this conference, which is very need of the hour, right? Riaz, you want to kind of release a white paper and I'll probably give a brief of it. Thanks a lot, Riaz. I think it's a very proud moment for us to release this white paper, autonomous supply chain planning for complex manufacturing companies, right? So Soumya and I co-authored along with some of the global experts. I think stepping back, Soumya clearly explained the background of survey, what was it and what was the need of the autonomous planning. So I wanted to kind of quickly, in a 60-second level, wanted to kind of give a overview, right? Today, what we have addressed in this white paper, which will be very relevant for many companies who actually wanted to transform their planning process, right? I know everyone actually understands this AI and machine learning that actually hold the potential to kind of dramatically improve the supply chain performance. Let's probably understand what is autonomous planning, right? If I have to give a definition to it, right? It is a continuous, as Soumya mentioned, it's a closed loop. And so it's a complete closed-loop approach, which has to be built into a fully automated technology platform. Otherwise, it's cannot serve the purpose, right? And it has to be designed, both the process as well the system, to optimize the complete S&OP. Soumya mentioned we need to move away from S&OP, the next level of S&OP, right? How do you optimize S&OP process in a real time? So that's the autonomous planning. For a large, complex manufacturing companies, the autonomous planning actually can bring a lot of wonders on the table, right? It actually can help supply chains more efficiently in a very volatile. Today, I think the volatility comes from a B2C and B2B. It's huge. It's sometimes more than 60-70% volatility from the consumer, even from the OEM level, right? So, and that's where this autonomous planning will actually help to kind of how we can address the overall end-to-end planning with a less direct human oversight, and how do we kind of bring the the autonomous decision making, right? And this it combines the big data, both internal as well external, because we have a lot of third parties involved, from supplier, third party logistics service provider. So it combines a complete the data stream of your partners, just evolving today with just big data, internal, external, consumer or customer informations, and bring the advanced analytics at every step of the supply chain planning process. So look at the demand planning, the good old statistical forecasting has to be move away, and then we need to get into an AI machine learning element. Look at the inventory. It's not a single stage inventory. It has to move to a multi-echelon level of inventory optimization. And look at the production. It has to be a real-time shift-wise production scheduling element, right? So that's how advanced analytics at each step, right? Although it is based on technology, as Soumya indicated, they require more than hardware and software. So that is very important. And the 5 important elements which I want to kind of indicate, which we have indicated in the white paper, which is very relevant for all the people, right? Which is, one is reduce human involvement. How do you rely on integrated advanced analytics, which is the AI, ML, and DL element? How do you evolve from a structured planning process? It is not, we need to get away of the current planning process. It has to be evolved from a structured planning process. Then we need to hardwire our processes and KPIs indicated earlier directly into the business unit. That is very important. Then build the complete organizational capability to evolve over time. Then the autonomous planning will come on the table. So that is the clear articulation we made in the white paper. This will be very relevant for anyone who actually wanted to transform their planning. Happy to have any specific discussions if anyone required. Soumya, any quick thoughts from you?
No, I think you covered well, Ganesh. As I mentioned, this is a topic of a lot of interest and passion, and really happy to be here to talk on this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, over to Mr. Bharat, and we're very proud to release this white paper, and long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And of course, a lot of us have been very eagerly waiting to hear from Mr. Anand Bhaskar, Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, to deliver his inaugural address. So, Mr. Bhaskar, may I kindly invite you to deliver your address? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Joshi. So, distinguished panelists and speakers of today's conference, all the delegates who are joining today from Japanese and Indian industries, a very warm good morning to one and all. And let me confess first one thing before speaking a few words on the topic, that I'm not expert on the topic. But in academics, there is a concept called common man's perspective or commonsensical perspective. So whatever I'm going to speak today, it's basically a perspective of common sense. So in my mind, what I find is that secure, sustainable, and resilient global supply chains are foundation to our economic prosperity, national security, collective interest, and sustainable economic development for all. Secure, sustainable, and resilient supply chains require that we work in partnership, not only as governments, but with industry, unions and workers, civil society, and various, or rather most international organizations alike. So, as pointed out by previous speakers, there's that the technology and the 3 key elements which this conference is going to discuss, they are of course very important, pertinent. But I would start, I'll take some clues from what Mr. Ganguly was saying, that the 4 elements, not just technology. So that would be my key issue. And also, one should keep in mind the consumer's perspective as well while discussing this entire theme of global supply chain. So in this background, I would like to highlight some of the equally important issues which are related to global supply chain resilience and which must be deliberated upon either at this forum or any other relevant forum. Number one is, to my mind, is transparency. So what is transparency? So transparency is basically information sharing between the countries and businesses that will help to mitigate and respond to the global supply chain shocks. Transparency in supply chain promotes awareness of risks and potential shortages, identifies bottlenecks, and assists organizations in determining whether alternative sources of critical inputs are needed, which further leads to more informed purchasing decisions. To my mind, the transparency is first key issue. The second is diversity, openness, and predictability. You must be aware that to maintain multiple reliable source of raw materials, intermediate goods, and finished goods are very crucial, and they are underpinned by resilient supply channels for global competitiveness in the market. Diverse global supplies not only promote resilience, they also foster interconnectedness and shared prosperity. So diversity of this sources, their openness, and most importantly, important point is the predictability, as pointed out by Mr. Ganguly, and we have seen it during this pandemic period. So predictability is also very important. The third is security. So addressing security vulnerabilities can prevent damage or disruptions that interface with critical systems or infrastructure, or contribute to unnecessary costs, inefficient delivery schedules, loss of intellectual properties and goods, or delivery of unauthorized compromised product. So while talking about this global supply chain, this security issue is equally important as per my mind. And last but not the least is the sustainability. So this sustainability issue, to my mind, is not only related to the environment, but it is also related to the labor issues, gender issues, etc., and etc. And we must point out how this whole global supply chain resilience is going to talk about the labor issues, the gender issues, and other key factor is this MSMEs. How this the MSMEs are going to get benefit out of this whole thing, or how they are going to cope with a whole lot of this issue is very much important. So in this background, I must say, since I'm directly dealing with this trade policy thing, so recently G20 countries, they have also committed to jointly work on these issues, and they are now saying that there are four pillars of global supply chain resilience. And as pointed out by our Prime Minister during COP26, this net zero emission by 2070. So here it is not only the government, but industries, businesses, governments, and all the stakeholders, they have to collaborate while dealing with these issues. So with this remark, I would like to conclude my words, and I'm pretty hopeful that this conference will be able to deliberate upon the best practices and application of modern technologies in global supply chain resilience. And I will be keen to know more about planned actions and outcomes of this conference. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving this forum. Thanks a lot, Mr. Joshi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhaskar. It was really very enlightening for us to hear your words. I'm actually also very privileged to be delivering the concluding remarks for the session of Global Supply Chain Summit 2022, with the focus on, as we just heard, supply chain in the new millennium, resilient digital twins, connected warehouses, and sustainability. It's a huge pleasure that I take on behalf of myself and of CII in thanking Mr. Anand Bhaskar, whom we just heard. Sir, I very deeply appreciate the common sense perspective that you brought to the deliberations, and something we had alluded to but not addressed very squarely, you brought out so beautifully, which was around supply chain security. And that really is what is driving a lot of thinking now, whether it's energy security, food security, vaccine security, or anything else. And you brought in, I thought, a somewhat unique perspective, which was around intellectual property security, which also, you're right, is something that needs to be preserved and protected as IP-heavy products or services move across supply chains. And you brought out very well how fundamental the supply chains and this discussion is to security, prosperity, and sustainability, and how it requires us all to work together in partnership. So thank you so much. I think this was really the perfect way to bring some sort of cohesion to the different thoughts and discussions that we heard this morning. Many thanks also to my friend, Mr. Nitin Vyas, for his address. I think we are sort of fellow passengers in the sense that we are both supply chain professionals, and you brought out so well the challenges that supply chain professionals are facing today, and for no making of our own, essentially. And this is, like you said, the last 2 years have been so enormously challenging. Sustainability on top of that is a new concern. And really like what you said about sustainability, that it's not something you do to retrofit, but something you think about at the design stage. So I think that was, a great takeaway for me, and also some optimism, because you did say that there are new opportunities that will come out of this VUCA world. Dr. Ganesh, thanks for your views and brief on the white paper on autonomous supply chain planning, and how really to make things autonomous, ideally one needs to work towards the closed loop, as you described it. Also, thanks to your colleague, Mr. Ganguly, and both of you, of course, spoke on similar subjects. And it was quite interesting that customer expectations are so elevated, both in terms of service levels and lead times. So higher service levels, lower lead times. And across everything that you said, one takeaway for me was around inventory. That inventory really, continues to be the biggest challenge. And how do we think about it, right? So there's this trade-off between resilience and resiliency and leniency, right? So which one do you want? And supplier management, and how you brought out that not even to a tier 3, but also tier 4 or 5 level suppliers. So very, very important issues. And I think, it gives us some answers, but also it gives us some more deep thought to, more clearly deliberate on these issues. So friends, with that, it's a wrap. Once again, a big thanks to everyone who joined in. A bigger thanks to the speakers who shared their experience and the time with us. And I finally wish the Global Supply Chain Summit 2022 a grand success. Thank you all.